For 4 years, I believed my daughter was happy in New York with her husband. She never came home, but my phone kept lighting up with messages. "I'm fine, Dad. Don't worry." Then one snowy night at my old repair shop, a delivery man placed a cracked phone on my counter and whispered, "You're her father, aren't you? Don't open this here." 10 minutes later, I watched a video of my daughter behind a door, locked from the outside. Her first words were, "Dad." For 4 years, the person texting you was never me. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we go any further, leave a comment. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love when no one believed you? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs today. Just a quick note, this story includes some fictional elements to highlight the lesson. What truly matters is the message it carries. At 69, I had learned to trust the rhythm of broken things, the click of a misaligned gear, the silence where a spring should tension, the weight of a case that told you whether the mechanism inside was complete or missing pieces. I had spent most of my life fixing broken things in my small shop in Laramie, Wyoming. Vintage, watches, old radios. Anything with moving parts that people thought worth saving. The work taught you patience. It taught you that most problems had solutions if you looked close enough and did not force what needed time. That January evening, snow fell past the shop windows while I sat at my workbench under warm yellow lamplight, working on a pocket watch someone's grandfather had carried through a war. The brass case was scratched but solid. Inside, the movement had frozen decades ago, corrosion on the balance wheel, a broken mainspring. Fixable. Everything was fixable if you had the right tools and enough stubbornness. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my daughter, Soleil, in New York City. "I'm fine, Dad. New York is beautiful in winter." I smiled. She had moved there 4 years ago with her husband, Preston. Started an interior design company that did well enough, she rarely had time to call anymore. The text felt like her efficient, warm enough, the kind of check-in a busy 38-year-old sends her father so he does not worry. I typed back, "Stay warm. Wyoming's getting another 6 inches tonight." I almost put the phone down, almost went back to the watch. But something made me look at the timestamp. 1:47 a.m. New York time. I stared at those numbers. Soleil had never been a night owl. Even in high school, she would be asleep by 10:30 up at dawn. 4 years of marriage and city life might have changed her schedule, but 1:47 in the morning, I read the text again. The words were fine. The tone was fine. But the time was wrong. I tried calling. It went straight to voicemail, her voice bright and professional. "You've reached Soleil Cobb. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon." I did not leave one. What would I say? Your text timestamp seems odd. Outside wind pushed snow against the window glass. The shop smelled like machine oil and old wood, the accumulated scent of 40 years of repair work. I set the phone down and picked up the pocket watch again, but my hands were not steady anymore. The timestamp sat in my head like a gear that would not mesh. Maybe she had been working late. Maybe she had insomnia. Maybe the timestamp was wrong. Phones glitched, sometimes showed the wrong time if they had been reset recently. I built reasons like I built watch movements piece by careful piece, trying to make them fit together into something that ran smooth. But I should have known then. A father should know when his daughter's voice is not her own. The shop bell chimed. I looked up. The door had opened, letting in a gust of cold air and swirling snow. A man stood in the entrance, 35 maybe, wearing a delivery company jacket with a logo I did not recognize, holding something in both hands like it was fragile or dangerous. He was not shivering from the cold. He was shivering from fear. "We're closed," I said, standing. He stepped inside anyway and shut the door behind him. His eyes scanned the shop, the shelves of old clocks, the radio chassis waiting for repair, the window, the door back to me. He walked to the counter and set down what he had been carrying. A phone. Screen cracked like a spider web, black glass reflecting the lamplight in fractured pieces. "You're Soleil Whitfield's father." His voice was low, urgent. "Soleil Cobb," I corrected automatically. "She got married. Who are you?" "Desmond Donovan." He pushed the phone toward me across the counter, then pulled his hand back fast like it had burned him. "I deliver to her building sometimes. Manhattan. I saw—" He stopped, swallowed. I couldn't keep this. I can't be part of it. "Part of what?" I looked at the phone, then at him. "What is this?" Don't turn it on here, he whispered, glancing at the window like someone might be watching through the falling snow. Watch it alone. I'm serious. Don't let anyone see you watching it. Watch what? I can't keep this anymore. He backed toward the door. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I waited this long. I didn't know if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing, and then I was sure and I couldn't. Wait. I came around the counter. You need to tell me what's on this phone. Is my daughter in trouble? His hand was on the door handle. He looked at me, and I saw something in his face I'd seen before in soldiers who came back from wars and people who had witnessed accidents they could not unsee. Guilt and horror mixed together. She needs you, he said. She needs someone who'll believe her. Then he opened the door and disappeared into the snow, leaving boot prints that the wind erased in seconds. The screen glowed to life. One video file in the gallery, no name, no date. Just a thumbnail of a woman's face in a white room. I pressed play. My daughter Soleil appeared 38 years old, owner of a thriving Manhattan design firm, but the woman staring back had hollow eyes I did not recognize, shadows dark as bruises underneath. Her hair was longer than she had ever worn it, pulled back severe. Behind her, white walls, white ceiling, white everything. Dad, her voice cracked, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but if you're watching, then someone braver than me got it to you. She looked off camera, checking something. When she looked back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady, the kind of steady that comes from practicing words until emotion cannot break them. For the past 4 years, the person who texted you has never been me. The shop went silent except for her voice through the cracked speaker. Every message, every photo, I'm fine, Dad, none of it was me. I haven't touched a phone in 4 years. Preston controls everything. He has someone send them. I don't know who, but they've been pretending to be me since 2021. The camera shifted. I could see more of the room now, a bed with white sheets, a white chair, and on the door behind her, a lock, the kind that bolts from the outside. I tried to leave once. He caught me in the lobby, told the doorman I was having an episode, that I was off my medication. They believed him. She looked directly at the camera. If you're seeing this, it means you know now. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry you believed I was happy when I was... The video cut off. I sat in the dark shop phone screen, fading to black. 4 years. 4 years of text messages I had smiled at, photos I had shown to friends, conversations where I had told people my daughter was thriving in New York. 4 years of lies in my pocket every day. I walked through the dark shop to the back stairs, climbed to my apartment, turned on every light, sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my own phone. I opened the message thread from Soleil, from whoever had been pretending to be Soleil. 4 years of texts, stared back, hundreds of them. I scrolled to the beginning, January 2021, right after she and Preston had married. The messages had started normal, then gradually became distant, efficient. Less like my daughter, more like status reports. How's the shop business? Good. Weather's cold here, stay warm. Can't talk long, big project deadline. I had told myself she was busy. Marriage and career meant less time for her old man in Wyoming. I had told myself a lot of things that let me sleep at night. How many times had I smiled at those texts, believing my daughter was happy? How many nights had I gone to sleep, grateful she was thriving? I started examining the messages, the way I examined broken watches, systematically looking for the flaw. The photos came first. I opened every image. Thanksgiving dinner with Preston, Christmas tree in their apartment, summer in Central Park, gallery opening, her design office, always smiling, but her eyes never quite reached the expression. I checked the metadata on the first photo, December 15th, 2020. Second photo, December 15th, 2020. Third, 4th, 10th, 20th. Every single photo had the same date stamp, all taken on one day. In December 2020, then sent to me gradually over 4 years. Someone had dressed her in different outfits, posed her in different locations, and built an entire fake timeline in a single afternoon. I had spent my life fixing watches, understanding that one broken gear could stop an entire mechanism while everything else kept ticking, hiding the fault. Someone had removed my daughter like a gear and kept the rest of the clock running so I would never notice. I went back to the text messages, reading with new eyes. The grammar was wrong. Soleil had never used Oxford commas. She would write red, white, and blue instead of red, white, and blue. Said the extra comma was unnecessary. A small thing. The kind of detail you do not think about until you are searching for proof that the person you are talking to is not who they claim. Every single text message used Oxford commas. Finished the project, packed my bag, and heading home. Met with clients, reviewed designs, and closed the deal. Saw mom's favorite flowers, bought some tulips, and put them on my desk. Someone had been writing these messages. Someone who did not know my daughter well enough to copy her grammar. Someone who had built her entire fake life from photos and scheduled texts. I sat at that kitchen table as night bled into early morning, surrounded by evidence of a lie so careful it had fooled me for 4 years. My wife Opal had died 3 years ago, cancer quick and cruel. Before she went, she had asked about Soleil more than usual. "You're sure she's happy?" she had said. "You're sure Preston is good to her?" I had shown her the texts, the photos, said yes, I was sure. Opal had looked at me with eyes that knew she was dying. If something feels wrong after I'm gone, trust that feeling. I had not trusted it. I had trusted the messages instead. Dawn light began filtering through the apartment windows, turning the snow outside pale blue. I sat surrounded by 4 years of fake messages. A video of my daughter in a white prison and a cracked phone from a stranger who had risked everything to deliver it. Someone had done this. Someone had taken my daughter and built a perfect lie around her disappearance. Preston Cobb, her husband, the financial broker with the perfect smile who had seemed too polished when they had gotten married, I was going to find out what he had done. I was going to take apart his lie piece by piece, the way I had always fixed broken things methodically, patiently, until I found every fault. And then I was going to get my daughter back. I opened the shop at 8 the next morning like nothing had changed, then dialed my son-in-law's number with hands that no longer shook. I had used up all my shaking in the dark hours between midnight and dawn. My second phone sat on the workbench beside me, set to record. I had learned that trick from warranty disputes. Always document the conversation. I pressed record, then called. Preston Cobb, 42, and a successful financial broker in Manhattan, answered on the third ring with that practiced warmth that had fooled me for 4 years. "Lowell, good to hear from you. How's Wyoming treating you?" "Cold as ever," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Listen, I was hoping to send Soleil some things for her birthday next month. Could you give me your address?" I realized I'd been sending everything to that P.O. box. "But I'd like to mail a package this time." A pause. Just half a second, but I heard it the moment where he recalculated. "Dad, I wish I'd caught you earlier. Soleil's having another episode. The doctor says she needs rest and minimal stimulation right now. You know how she gets." "No," I wanted to say. "I do not know how she gets, because the daughter I raised never had episodes." "Episode?" I kept my voice concerned, not suspicious. "Is she okay? Should I come out there?" "No, no." His tone shifted to soothing, like calming a worried animal. "It's under control. Her psychiatrist has adjusted her medication. She just needs quiet. You know how stressful the design business can be, deadlines, clients, the pressure. It builds up sometimes." I gripped the edge of the workbench. "Can I talk to her? Just for a minute." "She's resting right now. Sleeping most of the day, actually. The new medication makes her drowsy. But I'll tell her you called when she's up. She'll appreciate knowing you're thinking of her." "When do you think she'll be well enough for visitors?" Another pause, this one longer. "Hard to say. Her doctor wants to see improvement before we introduce any variables. You know how delicate these situations are. We don't want to set back her progress." His voice was perfect. Every syllable designed to sound like a concerned husband protecting a fragile wife. If I did not have that video, if I had not seen my daughter's hollow eyes and heard her say she had been imprisoned for 4 years, I would have believed every word. "I understand," I said. "Just have her call me when she's feeling better." I miss hearing her voice. "Of course, she misses you too, Dad. I'll make sure she knows you called." We said goodbye, normal, casual, the kind of conversation we had had dozens of times. I hung up, listened to the recording 3 times. His voice was flawless, every word calibrated to deflect without raising alarm. He had prepared these explanations, episodes, medication, doctor's orders, years in advance. A wall of medical terminology and psychiatric jargon that made anyone questioning him seem insensitive. Pushy, not understanding of mental health struggles. He had built a fortress of reasonable-sounding lies. I saved the recording, labeled it with the date and time. Then I sat in my shop, surrounded by broken watches and radios, thinking about fortresses and how to dismantle them. Opal would have known what to do. My wife, 67, when cancer took her 2 years ago, had always been better at reading people than reading technical manuals. She had met Preston once at their wedding and told me afterward something felt rehearsed about him. Like he's playing a part, she had said. I had dismissed it, told her city people were just more polished than Wyoming folks. But in her last weeks, she had asked about Soleil constantly. You're sure she's happy? You're sure Preston treats her well? When I showed her the texts and photos, she had studied them too long, face troubled. If something feels wrong after I'm gone, she had said, check the parts box in the back storage, the one I labeled important. I had thought she meant estate papers, insurance documents, the practical things dying people organize. I walked out the back door of the shop into the storage area, really just a covered space behind the building where I kept supplies and old inventory. Snow had drifted against the boxes. The air smelled like cold metal and ancient wood. I found the box she had labeled, pushed back behind paint cans and spare lumber. Opened it. Inside, on top of old watch parts and radio tubes, sat a sealed envelope. My name in Opal's handwriting. Below it, 3 words, if she disappears, open this. My hands shook again, different than before. Not fear recognition. I tore open the envelope. Lowell, the letter started. If you're reading this, I'm gone and Soleil is in trouble. I've watched Preston for 3 years. Something is wrong. I see it in how he looks at her, not with love, but calculation, like she's a problem he's solving. The words blurred. My wife's handwriting, familiar as my own heartbeat, telling me she had known. While I had been oblivious, repairing clocks and believing texts, Opal had been watching, suspicious, preparing. I tried asking her directly. The letter continued. She said everything was fine, but her voice was wrong. Flat, like she was reading from a script. I think he controls her communications. I think he's isolated her completely. She had listed observations, times Preston had deflected questions, instances where Soleil's responses seemed coached the way he had slowly cut off her contact with old friends. Small things, the kind of details you would miss if you were not looking for a pattern. I can't prove anything, she wrote, but I met someone who might help. A delivery driver named Desmond Donovan who brings packages to their building. He has kind eyes and a conscience. I gave him a way to contact you if he ever saw something wrong. I told him about the shop, about you. I trusted him to do the right thing if the moment came. Desmond, the terrified man who had brought me the cracked phone. He had not found me by accident. Opal had built that connection years ago, a safety net I had never known existed. The letter ended simply, fight for her. You fix broken things, that's what you do. Our daughter is broken but not beyond repair. Fix this, Lowell. I trust you. I stood in the cold storage area, snow falling through gaps in the roof, holding my dead wife's instructions. She had suspected, she had prepared, and she had trusted me to finish what she could not. Opal had built me a roadmap from beyond the grave, starting with a frightened delivery driver who had finally found the courage to follow through on a promise he had made to a dying woman. Now I just needed to figure out where the road led. The roadmap led to Ralph Manning's law office 2 days later. Ralph, the only trusted lawyer in Laramie, looked at the evidence, Opal's letter, the cracked phone, the fake texts, and the recording with grave concern. Opal came to me 3 years ago, Ralph revealed, opening a file. She asked me to quietly research Preston. She also made me promise to help you if Soleil ever became unreachable. He pulled out a power of attorney document signed 2 years ago, giving Preston full financial and medical control. The signature was shaky and trembling. This wasn't signed willingly, Ralph said. This is duress. He pulled up the financial records. Preston now controlled Soleil's interior design company, valued at $2.8 million, and their penthouse worth $1.4 million. A total of $4.2 million acquired through a legal fortress. We need evidence of false imprisonment to revoke this, Ralph said. But first we need their exact address. Come with me. We drove to a local cafe to meet Carlton Bentley, a retired NYPD fraud investigator. Carlton watched Soleil's video and immediately understood the pattern. Preston Cobb. I can find his building's security records, Carlton said. Give me 3 days to get the address. But you can't just storm a luxury penthouse. You need a reason to be there. He looked at my hands. You're a repairman. These old buildings always need maintenance on vintage intercoms or fixtures. I can get you hired for a specific job. You walk in with a toolbox, looking like you belong. Invisibility was exactly what I needed. You'll have 20 minutes inside, Carlton warned. Do not try to take her out yourself, or you'll be arrested for kidnapping. Just take photos and video to document the proof. We dismantle this legally. Ralph agreed. I looked at my calloused hands, ready to dismantle a lie instead of a watch. 3 days, I said. Then I'm going to New York. Carlton's call came on the third day, and the first thing he said wasn't the address, it was a warning. He knew you were coming long before you did. I was standing in my shop morning light, filtering through the windows. A pocket watch open on my workbench. I set down my tools carefully. Explain. I found the address, Carlton said. 847 Park Avenue, penthouse unit. Tenant of Record Cobb Holdings, LLC, your son-in-law's shell company. No connection to Soleil's name anywhere in the paperwork. And the warning, I did some digging into phone records. Preston's been monitoring your number for 2 weeks. Since before Desmond delivered that cracked phone, he's known someone was making contact. The shop went quiet. Outside, snow fell past the windows. Inside, the floor had just dropped out from under me. How? Best guess. When Desmond researched your shop online, looked up the address, the phone number, Preston's surveillance flagged it. He probably has alerts set up for anyone searching information connected to Soleil's past. Smart criminals don't wait for threats to arrive. They watch for people looking. I thought about that terrified delivery driver who'd walked into my shop, dropped the phone, and disappeared into the snow. How long had he waited before gathering the courage? How many weeks had he spent researching, planning, trying to figure out how to get evidence to me without Preston noticing? Desmond thought he was being careful, I said. He was careful, just not careful enough. Preston's been 2 steps ahead from the beginning. I'd thought I was hunting, but Preston had seen me pick up the scent weeks ago, and he'd been watching me follow the trail he wanted me to find. Does he know about the video? Can't tell from the records, but he knows someone contacted you. He knows it was significant enough that you'd start asking questions. Carlton paused. Which means when you show up in New York, he'll be expecting you. Then I walk in knowing he's watching. That's the spirit. I've set up your cover maintenance call for the building's old intercom system. You're scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Building manager expects you. You'll have credentials, work order, everything legitimate. But understand this, Preston will know. Maybe not immediately, but soon. How long do I have? 20 minutes, maybe 30 if the building manager is slow to report upstairs. Get in confirm Soleil's location document. Everything you can get out. Don't try to extract her. Don't confront Preston. Just gather evidence. 20 minutes to prove my daughter's been imprisoned for 4 years. 20 minutes, Carlton confirmed. Then we take what you find to authorities and dismantle this legally. You deviate from the plan, you end up in handcuffs instead of him. 2 days later, I stood in Laramie's small airport with a vintage toolbox that had followed me through 40 years of repair work. Inside were screwdrivers, pliers, circuit testers, wire strippers, every tool worn smooth from use. I wasn't playing a repairman. I was a repairman. Every tool in this box was real. Every callus on my hands was earned. This wasn't a disguise, it was who I'd always been. The flight from Laramie to LaGuardia took 4 hours. I sat in Coach Toolbox at my feet, watching Wyoming's mountains give way to plains, then cities, then the dense sprawl of the East Coast. Somewhere below me, my daughter sat in a white room, waiting for someone to find her. I'd fixed broken clocks for 40 years. This was just another repair job. Find the broken piece, document the damage, figure out how to make it whole again. LaGuardia Airport was chaos. Thousands of people moving in every direction, announcements echoing off tile floors, the smell of coffee and jet fuel, and humanity packed too close together. I collected my toolbox from baggage claim and walked toward the exit. That's when I saw him. A young man about 28 stood near the baggage carousel, hands in his jacket pockets, staring at me with the kind of focus that wasn't curiosity, it was surveillance. Not glancing at his phone, not scanning for someone, just watching me. I kept walking, met his eyes for a second. He didn't look away. That was how I knew amateurs look away when you catch them staring embarrassed to be noticed. Professionals hold your gaze just long enough to let you know they want you to know. Preston had sent someone to watch from the moment I landed. I adjusted my grip on the toolbox and kept moving toward the exit. The young man didn't follow, but I felt his eyes tracking me across the terminal, making sure I knew, making sure I understood that this wasn't a secret mission. It was a chess game where both players could see the board. How many others were watching the woman at the coffee stand? The taxi driver outside, how deep did Preston's surveillance run? Carlton had warned me. Preston knew I was coming. But knowing something intellectually and feeling eyes on you in a crowded airport were different things. The first was abstract. The second was a weight on your shoulders, a tightness in your chest. I walked through the automatic doors into cold New York air. January wind cut through my work jacket, the same jacket I'd worn in my shop for a decade, stained with machine oil and worn at the elbows. Real, authentic, the perfect armor. Behind me, through the terminal glass, I could still see the young man watching. I didn't acknowledge him, didn't wave or nod or give any sign I'd noticed. Just carried my toolbox toward the taxi stand and climbed into the first available cab. Where to? The driver asked. Midtown Hotel, I said, giving him the address Carlton had arranged. As the cab pulled away, I looked back once. The young man was gone, but that didn't mean he'd stopped watching. This wasn't a secret mission anymore. Preston had announced he was watching every move I made. Tomorrow morning, I'd walk into his fortress with nothing but a toolbox and 69 years of patience. He thought surveillance would scare me off. He didn't understand that I'd spent a lifetime repairing things people said couldn't be fixed, breaking things apart to see how they worked, then putting them back together the right way. I was about to take apart Preston Cobb's perfect lie one piece at a time. The next morning, I walked into Preston's fortress, carrying a vintage toolbox and 69 years of patience. The lobby of 847 Park Avenue was designed to intimidate with its 20-foot ceilings and expensive Italian marble. A security desk was manned by someone who looked at my worn outfit with clear disapproval. Bryce Lancaster, 45, and managing the luxury residential tower, studied me with professional suspicion. Can I help you? His voice was neutral. I'm here to check the communication lines, I said. Building management called yesterday about the vintage intercom system. I set my toolbox on the counter. Bryce looked at his computer screen, then back at me. I wasn't notified about any service call. Who authorized this? Should be in your work order system. Maintenance request for the penthouse floor. He typed into his system. The work order was technically legitimate because Carlton had pulled the right strings, but Bryce hesitated. Preston had clearly instructed him to watch for threats. I'll need to verify this with building ownership, Bryce said. Take your time. I leaned against the counter and waited. 69 years of fixing watch springs had taught me never to force a tight mechanism. Bryce made a quiet phone call, whispering phrases like service call and should I refuse entry. After listening for a moment, he hung up. He looked trapped between a desire to obey Preston and the risk of refusing official building maintenance. How long will this take? He asked. Depends on what I find. Could be 10 minutes, could be an hour. Bryce sighed, unable to find a valid reason to deny me. Penthouse floor only. I need to note your entry. He logged my fake credentials and buzzed me through. I walked toward the elevator bank, my heart hammering, but my hands perfectly steady. Near the elevators, the side door opened, and Carlton stepped through, wearing building maintenance coveralls. We stepped into the service elevator together, and the heavy doors slid shut. He called Preston immediately, Carlton said quietly. The building manager is paid $15,000 to look the other way when hallway security footage needs deleting and to report anyone asking about the penthouse. $15,000 to help imprison my daughter, I muttered. People are cheap, Carlton said, pointing up at the corner of the elevator. But look at that camera. The manager erased months of hallway footage, but elevator cameras are on a separate system. They auto-upload to remote cloud storage. The building manager cannot touch them because the elevator company maintains them remotely. I stared at the lens. Preston missed a gear. He paid to erase the hallways, but he didn't know about this camera. Carlton smiled grimly. I accessed the cloud storage this morning. There are 8 months of footage here. One clip shows Soleil entering this elevator alone with luggage at 4 a.m. and Preston appearing seconds later to drag her back out. The doorman believed his lie about a psychiatric episode, but this camera recorded the physical struggle. That is definitive proof of false imprisonment. The elevator slowed as it reached the top floor. The manager will realize my work order is fake soon, I said. You've got maybe 20 minutes before Preston sends someone to investigate, Carlton warned. Identify the unit, confirm she is there, and look for any immediate witnesses. Do not confront anyone. Just gather what we need for the police. The doors opened onto the pristine penthouse floor. I stepped out, toolbox in hand, looking at 4 identical doors. 20 minutes, starting now. I knocked on a door 2 units down from where Carlton said Soleil was being held. When it opened, a 55-year-old man named Hugh Newberry looked at my toolbox with immediate curiosity. Yes, he asked. I'm a repairman, but I am also someone else. I pulled out a photograph of Soleil taken before she left Wyoming. I am her father. Hugh stared at the picture, his face turning pale. Oh God, you're really here. Come inside, please. He closed the door quickly and turned to me. I heard her crying for help through our shared wall about 8 months ago. It was 2 a.m. She was knocking on the wall, screaming for someone to save her. I called 911 immediately. What did the police do? I asked, my throat tight. Your son-in-law answered the door completely calm. He explained his wife was having a severe mental episode and showed them official psychiatric documentation. The officers actually apologized to him for the disturbance and left. I heard her crying on other nights, but I told myself the authorities knew better. I've felt guilty ever since. You can fix that mistake now, I said. I'm building a legal case to remove his guardianship. Will you testify in court about what you heard? Yes, Hugh answered without hesitation. Whatever you need. I cannot carry this guilt anymore. I gave him Carlton's number and stepped back into the hallway. My 20 minutes were almost up. Carlton signaled me from the service elevator. The building manager had just alerted Preston's office. We descended quickly, bypassed the lobby desk, and escaped into the cold Manhattan air. The next afternoon, Carlton arranged for me to meet Corinne Kelly at a quiet corner cafe. Corinne was a 40-year-old home care nurse with tired eyes who had been hired by Preston's agency. Your daughter isn't sick, Mr. Whitfield, she said directly. I cared for her for 8 months. She was perfectly sharp and articulate. The heavy sedatives Preston forced her to take 3 times a day simply made her too exhausted to fight. In all that time, I never saw an actual doctor examine her. Did she know what he was doing to her? Yes. Corinne's voice trembled. She knew exactly what was happening. When we were alone once, she looked at me and whispered, "Please find a way to tell my father." Those exact words. The background noise of the cafe seemed to vanish. Why didn't you contact me? I asked quietly. I wanted to, Corinne cried softly, but right after she asked me, Preston casually mentioned my own young daughter. He asked where she went to school and said he hoped she stayed safe. It was a direct threat. I was terrified for my child. My daughter had been locked away, praying a stranger would send word to Wyoming, while I had been sitting at home smiling at fabricated text messages. She had never stopped trying to reach me. You had a child to protect Corinne. I don't blame you, I said, handing her Carlton's card. But the time to be brave is now. Will you tell a judge what you just told me? She wiped her eyes and nodded firmly. Yes, I will testify. I want to help get her out of that place. I left the cafe with 2 powerful witnesses. Preston had used money to silence the building manager paperwork to defeat the police and fear to quiet the nurse. But his perfect machine was falling apart. Now that I had the evidence and the voices to prove his crime, it was time to find her old friends buried and break his fortress completely. Carlton located the final piece of our puzzle that afternoon. Pilar Sinclair, 38, and Soleil's closest friend since their design school days. Pilar's Manhattan studio smelled of paper and charcoal. The moment I walked through her door, she looked up from her drafting table. You finally know, she said flatly, as if she had been waiting years for this exact moment. How long have you suspected? I asked. Since the first month, Pilar said, wiping her hands. The texts were wrong, the grammar was perfect, but the voice was entirely gone. Soleil and I used nicknames V-Girl and Starfish for 15 years. Those names never appeared once in 4 years. My gut twisted as I thought of the Oxford commas and timestamp errors I had overlooked. Why didn't you contact me? I tried. I called your shop twice and left voicemails saying I was worried, but you never called back. I realized then that Preston must have been screening her old life, deleting anything connecting to Wyoming. I even showed up at her building, Pilar continued, but the doorman turned me away. When I called Preston, he claimed she was going through an illness. He threw a wall of medical jargon at me, using words like episodes and medication adjustment to make me feel like I was hurting her by pushing. She picked up her phone and opened an audio file. Listen to this. Her real voice from her wedding day 4 years ago. It is only 11 seconds. She pressed play and Soleil's bright laughing voice filled the room. P-Star, I can't believe I'm actually married. Call me later. Okay, I want to hear everything about... Then it cut off. Those 11 seconds reminded me exactly who my daughter was before Preston erased her. Everything you've received since then isn't her, Pilar said gently. Will you testify? I asked. I'll do more than that, Pilar replied, gesturing to her phone. I kept every single cold, grammatically perfect message. I documented the dates, times, and the exact shift in her communication style. I've been building this case for 4 years. I left her studio with 3 powerful witnesses, secured a neighbor who heard cries, a nurse forced to sedate her, and a best friend who noticed the fraud from day one. As evening fell, I walked back toward Park Avenue. Halfway across the luxury lobby, I ran straight into Preston Cobb. At 42, he looked completely assembled. Perfect hair, perfect suit, and a flawless smile that failed to reach his eyes. Dad, he said, crossing the marble floor with an extended hand, what a wonderful surprise. If I'd known you were visiting New York, I would have arranged everything. I shook his smooth hand. I wanted to surprise Soleil. You know how she loves surprises. His eyes turned cold and calculating. She does, though lately she's been fragile. Her episodes can be triggered by unexpected stress. He was using his favorite shield again. I'd still like to see her, I insisted. It's been too long. Of course, Preston smiled smoothly. Let me arrange a proper visit for tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. I'll make sure she is prepared. Prepared meant medicated, monitored, and coached to play the role of a sick wife. That would be perfect, I said. We smiled like old friends, but the hunter now knew his prey had teeth. Preston held the door for me, offering a final veiled warning. Don't stay out too late. Manhattan can be unpredictable. Through the lobby glass, I could feel him watching me walk away into the cold night. Tomorrow at 2, I would step directly into his trap. He would have her heavily sedated, but I would finally be in the same room as my daughter for the first time in 4 years. Sometimes the only way to dismantle a lie is to walk straight into it, and I was going to let Soleil know I had finally come to bring her home. At 2 o'clock the next afternoon, Preston opened the penthouse door with a smile that was all performance. The penthouse was beautiful, the way a museum is beautiful, cold white pristine. Everything looked expensive, and nothing looked lived in. And when I saw my daughter sitting on the white sofa with unfocused eyes and hands folded like a child, told to be still, something in my chest cracked open. Soleil was thinner than in the video. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a way she'd never worn it. She wore a white sweater and white pants blending into the room like she was part of the furniture. Soleil, Preston said, voice gentle. Your father came all the way from Wyoming to see you. Isn't that wonderful? She looked up slowly. Her eyes took a moment to focus. When they found my face, something flickered recognition, fighting through fog. Dad? Her voice was soft, uncertain. I crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. Not too close. Preston was watching from the doorway, monitoring every movement. Hi, sweetheart. I wanted to see how you're doing. She paused like the words took effort to find. I'm tired, Dad. Always so tired. The doctors say rest is important, Preston said from behind me. Too much excitement isn't good for her condition. I looked at my daughter, tried to see past the medication, past the carefully arranged tableau Preston had created. She was in there. I knew she was in there. Are they taking good care of you? I asked. She nodded slowly. Preston takes care of everything. The words were right, but the delivery was wrong, flat rehearsed, like she'd been told what to say. I brought something from the shop. I reached into my jacket pocket. Preston tensed. I pulled out a small music box, one Soleil had tried fixing when she was 12, before we'd moved it to the parts box. Remember this. I held it out. She reached for it, hands moving through the air like moving through water. When our fingers touched around the music box, something changed. Her hand tightened, just for 1 second. Her grip went from soft to fierce fingers, pressing into mine with desperate strength. Her eyes focused clearing for just that moment, and I saw my daughter looking back at me. Then she let go. The fog returned. Her hands settled back in her lap. I remember, she said quietly. It never worked right. Some things just need time, I said, and patience, and someone who won't give up on fixing them. Her eyes met mine again, another flicker of awareness. I think that's probably enough for today, Preston said, moving into the room. Soleil needs her rest. 1 second. That's all she could give me. 1 second of her hand tightening around mine, her eyes focusing just enough to let me know she was still in there. Still fighting, still waiting for me to get her out. I stood. Take care, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. Bye, Dad. Soft, medicated. But her eyes held mine for one extra heartbeat. Preston walked me to the door. Thank you for understanding. Her condition requires careful management. Too much stimulation, too many visitors, it can trigger episodes. I appreciate you letting me see her, I said. We both knew I was lying. We both knew he knew I was lying. The performance was for anyone who might be listening later, cameras, recordings, witnesses. Plausible deniability wrapped in polite conversation. I left the penthouse and took the elevator down. Walked through the lobby, stepped out into February cold, and kept walking until I was 3 blocks away and sure nobody was following. Then I called Carlton. She's aware, I said. Medicated but aware. She squeezed my hand when Preston wasn't looking. She's still in there. Good, because I found something you need to hear. I met him at a coffee shop 4 blocks from my hotel. He had his laptop open, financial records spread across the table. Dr. Philip Graves, Carlton said. 55. Manhattan psychiatrist. Legitimate practice, good reputation, and completely bought. How much? $180,000 over 3 years. Paid through Preston's shell company. Careful installments designed to look like consulting fees. $180,000 to destroy my daughter's credibility with fake medical records. Can we prove it? Bank records show the transfers, and here's what matters. Carlton turned the laptop toward me. The psychiatric evaluation claiming Soleil has severe cognitive impairment and requires medical guardianship. It's dated April 15th, 2021. I looked at the date. What's significant about April? Preston didn't tell anyone about Soleil's supposed mental health issues until July 20th, 2021. 3 months later, the coffee shop noise faded. The date sat in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. The medical records were created 3 months before he announced she was sick. He didn't fabricate them in response to some crisis. He planned this, created the documentation in advance, then waited 3 months before using it, probably to establish a pattern, make it look like she'd been deteriorating gradually. 3 months. He'd walked around their home, slept beside her, kissed her goodnight, all while knowing the exact date he'd chosen to erase her from the world. That's premeditation, I said. That's first-degree fraud. That's conspiracy. That's evidence that every move Preston made was calculated months in advance. Carlton closed the laptop. He didn't react to anything. He planned her imprisonment like an engineer designing a machine, every piece fabricated before he needed it. I thought about that white penthouse. My daughter sitting on white furniture in white clothes folded into stillness, like an object Preston had arranged. How long had he been planning it? How many nights had he lain beside her, already knowing she'd end up locked in that white room? We have enough, Carlton said. Fake medical records, paid-off doctor, deleted security footage, witnesses who heard her crying for help. Your son-in-law built a perfect plan, but perfect plans need perfect execution. And he made a mistake. He made one mistake. That elevator camera that saves automatically to the cloud. The building manager deleted the hallway footage for $15,000 cash, but he didn't know about the camera he couldn't touch. Carlton pulled up another file on his laptop. 18 months of elevator footage. Every trip to and from that penthouse, including, he paused, including the night Soleil tried to escape. I stared at him. When 8 months ago, 4 a.m., footage shows her entering the elevator alone. Luggage, coat, heading to the lobby. His voice went grim. Then Preston appears in the next frame, grabs her, drags her back. Evidence? Proof. The thing Preston didn't know existed. His perfect plan broken by one camera he couldn't control. Carlton's laptop screen showed the bank transfer. $15,000 cash deposited to Bryce Lancaster's account. The same week, every hallway camera in the building mysteriously malfunctioned. The building manager had no idea he'd left one camera running. 3 deposits, Carlton said, pointing to the dates. $5,000 each, spread over 6 weeks to avoid triggering bank reports. All from Preston's shell company, routed through 2 intermediaries. We were sitting in a back corner of a Manhattan library, far from the Park Avenue building, laptops open between us. Carlton had spent the afternoon tracing payment trails. $15,000, I said. That's the price of looking the other way. That's the price of deleting every hallway camera in a luxury building. Bryce went through the main security system and wiped months of footage. Made it look like technical failures, cameras going offline one by one, recordings corrupting. Preston wanted no record of anyone entering or leaving that penthouse. But the elevator camera, different system entirely. Carlton pulled up technical diagrams. Hallway cameras feed into building security. Bryce has admin access, can delete whatever he wants. But elevator cameras are maintained by the elevator company. Automatic cloud backup. The footage uploads every night to servers Bryce doesn't even know exist. Preston didn't know either. Preston assumed deleting the hallways meant deleting everything. He paid to erase the witnesses, but he didn't understand the technology well enough to know about the one camera beyond his control. Preston had tried to erase every witness, delete every record, build a perfect invisible cage. But perfect cages don't exist. There's always one bar the builder forgets to check. How much footage? I asked. 18 months. Every trip through that elevator since the cloud system was installed. Carlton started downloading files. It's going to take a while. Hours of mundane footage, residents coming and going, deliveries, maintenance. But somewhere in there is evidence. We waited while files transferred. Gigabytes of data showing 18 months of an elevator doing its job. Most of it would be nothing. But Carlton had seen something in the timestamp logs. Something that mattered. Found it, he'd said earlier. 8 months ago, middle of the afternoon, you need to see this. That night, back in my hotel room, Carlton connected his laptop to the TV. Pulled up the footage he'd isolated. This is from 8 months ago, he said. March of last year, 2:47 p.m. The screen showed the elevator interior. Empty. Then the doors opened. Soleil stepped in. I stopped breathing. She was alone. Wearing in a coat I'd never seen, dark blue practical. Pulling a small overnight bag. Her hair was different than the video from the cracked phone, shorter, healthier. Her eyes were clear, bright, focused. She pressed the first floor button. The elevator descended. Soleil stood facing the door, bag at her feet, hands gripping the handle tight. Her face showed concentration, determination. Not the foggy, medicated woman I'd seen yesterday in the white penthouse. This was my daughter, the way she'd been before, sharp planning, moving with purpose. The doors opened. She stepped into the lobby. The camera angle changed, a lobby security feed. Time stamped 2:48 p.m. Soleil walked across the marble floor toward the building exit, past the security desk, past the doorman, moving fast but not running, trying not to draw attention. She reached the doors, pushed through, disappeared onto the Manhattan street. She got out, I whispered. Carlton's voice was quiet. Keep watching. The timestamp clicked forward. 2:49 p.m. Empty lobby. 2:50 p.m. Doorman at desk checking his phone. 2:51 p.m. Preston entered the frame. He walked fast across the lobby, not running, but moving with purpose. Face calm. Pushed through the doors to the street. Gone. 30 seconds of empty lobby. Then the doors opened again. Preston walked back in. Soleil was with him, his hand wrapped around her upper arm, pulling her. She was fighting. I could see her, trying to twist away, trying to stop walking. But Preston was stronger, bigger, relentless. He dragged her to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. I saw my daughter's face, not medicated anymore, not foggy, just terrified. The elevator arrived. Preston pulled her inside. The doors closed. 4 minutes, Carlton said. She had 4 minutes of freedom before he found her. I watched the footage again, then again. Each time I wanted to reach through the screen and tell her to run faster, hide, scream for help. Each time Preston appeared at exactly 2:51 p.m. and dragged my daughter back into her prison. Where was she going? I asked. Based on the direction, bus terminal is 3 blocks east. If she'd made it there, bought a ticket, gotten on a bus before Preston realized she was gone. Carlton shook his head. She almost made it. 3 blocks. 4 minutes. The distance between captivity and freedom measured in city blocks and stolen minutes. What happened after? I've been reviewing the weeks following. Preston barely left the penthouse, had everything delivered. Soleil doesn't appear in any footage for 2 months after this. My guess, he increased her medication, made sure she couldn't try again. I thought about yesterday's visit. Soleil on the white sofa, movements, slow eyes, unfocused. That wasn't her natural state. That was what Preston had turned her into after she'd proven she was dangerous. This is evidence, Carlton said. Proof she tried to leave. Proof he physically restrained her. Proof she wasn't voluntarily staying in that penthouse under medical care. She was imprisoned and recaptured when she escaped. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Couldn't stop looking at the final frame before the elevator doors closed. My daughter's face turned back toward the lobby exit, toward the freedom she'd touched for 4 minutes. The look in her eyes wasn't despair. It was calculation. She'd tried once. She'd been planning to try again, which meant Preston knew she was dangerous not to herself, but to him. She was aware, fighting, waiting for another chance. And that meant Preston was about to escalate. He'd tried isolation, tried medication, tried erasing every record of her resistance. But if he knew she was still fighting, still calculating, still looking for another 4 minutes to slip through his perfect cage. He's gonna do something, I said. What do you mean? Preston knows I'm here, knows I'm asking questions, finding witnesses, building a case. He planned everything perfectly, except the one camera he couldn't control. Now his perfect plan is falling apart, and his prisoner just proved she'll run the second she gets the chance. I looked at Carlton. He's going to try to take away my ability to fight for her, discredit me, neutralize the threat. How? The same way he neutralized her. Medical documentation, legal paperwork, making me look incompetent. I closed the laptop. He's going to come after me next. Preston's counterattack arrived Wednesday morning with a hotel courier. The envelope was thick, expensive paper. Coordinated care authorization for Soleil Whitfield, read the header. Official letterhead, Dr. Philip Graves's signature. The document explained that coordinating Soleil's medical needs required sharing information between family caregivers. It requested my signature to facilitate better treatment. It was so carefully worded it almost looked legitimate. I called Ralph Manning before touching it again. Preston sent documents to my hotel, I said. Your hotel? Ralph's voice went sharp. He knows where you're staying. I read him the document header. Don't sign that. That's not a care authorization, it's a weapon. Read Section 3, subsection B. I found it. Full access to all medical records of authorized parties. You sign that you're giving Preston and Dr. Graves access to every medical record you have. He'll find something, old injury medication, anything, and twist it into evidence of cognitive decline. Preston wasn't just fighting me. He was building a legal cage designed to look like concern, feel like help, and close around me the moment I signed my name. He knows which hotel I'm in, I said, which means he's tracking you. Assume everything you do is being monitored. Ralph paused. Don't sign, don't respond, save it as evidence. I hung up and stared at the papers. Preston had planned Soleil's imprisonment months in advance. Now he was planning mine not with locked doors, but with legal documents that would make me look incompetent. That afternoon, I went to a city park 3 blocks from the hotel, needed space to think. The young man from the airport sat on a bench near the trees. I recognized him immediately. 28, same focused stare, but now his hands were shaking. When he saw me, he stood. Please, he said, I need to talk to you. I stopped 10 feet away. You've been following me since LaGuardia. Yes. He looked around nervously. My name is Thane Fitzgerald. I'm Preston's nephew. He told me to watch you report your movements, said you were dangerous. Why tell me this now? Because I just found out he's building a case against me. Thane showed me his phone, financial records, transfer logs, money laundering. He's going to say I moved the offshore accounts. I looked at the transfers, dates matching what Carlton had found. Did you? I signed papers he told me to sign. Moved money he said was for investments. His hands shook. But he's been documenting everything. When someone investigates, he'll say, I was the mastermind. I'm the scapegoat. I looked at this young man trembling on a park bench and saw what Preston left in his wake. People who trusted him helped him and were now realizing they were tools to be discarded when convenient. Why should I believe you? Because I have proof. He pulled a USB drive from his jacket. Bank records showing $2.1 million transferred to Iceland over 18 months. Shell company documents. And a recording Preston talking to his mother about you. About how easy it would be to discredit a lonely old man from Wyoming. You recorded your uncle. I documented everything. He taught me that. Thane looked at me with desperate clarity. He already thinks I'm dangerous. He's just waiting to cut me loose. The question isn't whether he'll destroy me. It's whether I help you bring him down first. The park was quiet. February cold. This was Preston's surveillance now offering to switch sides because Preston had made the same mistake he'd made with Soleil. Assuming control meant loyalty. What do you want? I asked. Immunity. Witness protection if needed. His voice dropped. And I want to help free Soleil. I've been helping keep her prisoner. I need to fix that. I looked at the USB drive in his trembling hand. Give me the drive. I'll get it to my lawyer. If it's legitimate, you'll get immunity. Thane handed it over. The plastic was warm from his palm. He's going to come after you harder now, Thane said. That document this morning was just the beginning. I know. You can't stay at that hotel. I know that too. Thane stood, looked around the park once more. Thank you for listening. I wasn't sure you would. Enemy of my enemy, I said. He nodded and walked away, disappearing into the afternoon crowd. I sat on that bench holding a USB drive that might contain everything we needed to dismantle Preston's perfect plan. If Thane was telling the truth, if this wasn't another trap. But his hands had been shaking. His eyes had been desperate. And Preston had taught me one thing over the past 2 weeks. People who build cages eventually find themselves inside them. I left the park and called Carlton. I need you to verify something, I said. USB drive from Preston's nephew. He just switched sides. Silence. Then that's either the breakthrough we need or the trap that ends this. I know. Can you check it? Bring it to me. I'll verify authenticity check for malware. If it's real, we might have enough to file. I walked toward Midtown away from the hotel. Ralph was right. I couldn't go back there. Preston knew where I was, had sent documents to my room, probably had people watching. The USB drive in my pocket felt heavy. It contained either proof that would free Soleil or proof that Preston's perfect plan included contingencies I hadn't imagined. 2 weeks in New York, I'd gathered witnesses, found evidence, built a case piece by piece, the way I'd repair a broken watch, methodically, patiently, trusting that every small piece mattered. Now, Preston's own nephew had handed me what might be the final piece. Bank transfers, shell companies, and a recording of Preston explaining his entire plan. It felt like victory, but Preston didn't make mistakes. And his nephew delivering perfect evidence on a USB drive felt like another move in a game I didn't fully understand yet. I had proof if I could trust it. I had witnesses if Preston hadn't already planned how to discredit them. I had evidence if it wasn't exactly what Preston wanted me to have. The question wasn't whether I had enough to fight him. The question was whether everything I'd gathered was leading exactly where Preston had designed it to go. I kept walking. The USB drive stayed in my pocket, and somewhere in Manhattan, Preston was making his next move, probably 3 steps ahead of wherever I thought I was. Carlton verified the USB drive that evening. Every file was real. The bank transfers, the shell companies, and the recording that would either save us or destroy us. But first, I needed to see what Thane had actually given me. We met again in the park the next afternoon. Thane's hands shook as he pulled out a folder of printed bank documents. Then his phone with an audio file queued up 3 pieces of evidence that could destroy his uncle and sign his own death warrant in the process. 3 wire transfers, Thane said, spreading papers on the bench between us. $2.1 million from Soleil's design company to an Icelandic account over 18 months, all authorized under her medical power of attorney. I looked at the dates, the amounts, shell company names that meant nothing to anyone except the people hiding money. Preston controls the Iceland account through 2 intermediaries and a trust. But yes, the money goes. There, gets laundered through legitimate investments, comes back clean. Thane's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. That's half of everything she owned. Her company was worth $2.8 million. The penthouse, another $1.4. He took half and left her locked in a white room. I stared at the numbers. My daughter's life converted to wire transfers and shell companies. The recording, I said. Thane pulled up the audio file on his phone. Family dinner, 3 months ago. Preston and his mother. I had my phone in my pocket, recording app running. I'd started documenting everything by then. He pressed play. Preston's voice filled the space between us, calm, casual, certain. Lonely old men are the easiest to fool, Mother. He won't know anything until it's too late. A woman's voice responded, older, cultured. And if he does find out, then we show he's mentally incompetent. Small-town repairman with delusions about his successful daughter. Who would believe him over medical documentation? Thane stopped the recording. Preston's voice talking about me like I was a broken clock he was waiting to stop ticking. Not a person, not a father, just an obstacle he'd already planned how to remove. Thank you for saying that, Preston, I said quietly. Now everyone will hear it. Thane handed me the phone. It's all copied to the USB drive. Transfers, documents, recording, everything. Before I tell you what happened next, are you still with me? Comment. A, if you think Preston planned this perfectly, or B, if you think he made a fatal mistake, and add 1 reason in 5 to 10 words, so I can see how you're reading this story. Please note what follows includes some recreated details for emotional impact and narrative flow. The lesson is what matters most. I took the evidence and left the park. Went back to a different hotel Ralph had arranged. It paid cash. No name attached. Couldn't risk Preston knowing where I was anymore. The next morning, Thursday, a hotel courier knocked on my door. Another envelope. Same expensive paper? Different nightmare inside. Petition for competency evaluation, read the header. Manhattan Supreme Court. Filed by Preston Cobb regarding Lowell Whitfield. I sat on the bed and read. Petitioner requests court-ordered evaluation to determine if subject is capable of managing own affairs. Evidence includes increasing forgetfulness, missed appointments, paranoid accusations against family members, confusion about dates and events, inability to distinguish reality from conspiracy. Attached psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Philip Graves. Preliminary assessment suggesting cognitive decline consistent with early dementia. Recommendation for full neurological workup. Trial date 4 weeks. 4 weeks to prove I wasn't the delusional old man Preston had described. 4 weeks before a judge would decide if I was competent to fight for my daughter. I checked the document metadata the way Carlton had taught me. File created August 2024, 6 months ago, before Desmond delivered the cracked phone, before I'd seen Soleil's video, before I knew anything was wrong. Preston had created this document in August, updated it periodically, added details as they became relevant, built a legal case against me before I even started looking for evidence. 6 months. He'd been building a cage for me since August, watching me repair watches in Wyoming, knowing eventually I'd find out about Soleil and come for him, and he'd be ready. I called Ralph immediately. He filed a competency petition, I said. Trial in 4 weeks. Silence on the line. Then when was it created? August, 6 months before I got the phone. More silence. Ralph was thinking, calculating. That's premeditation. He anticipated your investigation and prepared a counterattack in advance. It also proves he knew Soleil was imprisoned. Why else prepare to discredit you unless he feared you'd discover her? Can we use that? Maybe. But first, we have to make sure you don't lose competency before the main case even starts. If a judge rules you incompetent, everything you've found becomes inadmissible. You can't file legal action, can't testify, can't fight for Soleil. What do? Counterfile immediately. Sue Preston for fraud, false imprisonment, and financial exploitation. Request emergency hearing, and get every witness ready to testify that you're completely competent, that you conducted a methodical, rational investigation that uncovered real crimes. Hugh, Corinne, Pilar, Thane, and Carlton, and me. We need everyone who's seen your work to stand up in court and explain that you're not delusional, you're right. I looked at the petition in my hands. Preston's perfect trap prepared months in advance. He saw me coming, I said. He saw someone coming, he just didn't know it would be you. Ralph's voice went hard. And he didn't know you'd find the one camera he couldn't delete, the one nephew he couldn't control, and the one voice recording that proves he planned everything. 4 weeks. That's all I had to prove I wasn't the paranoid old man Preston had described in documents, created before I'd even seen my daughter's video. 4 weeks to gather every witness present, every piece of evidence, and convince a judge that the real delusion was thinking Preston Cobb was a concerned husband instead of a calculating predator. And to do that, I needed every person I'd found: Hugh, who'd heard her crying; Corinne, who'd cared for her; Pilar, who'd noticed the fake texts; Thane, who'd documented the transfers to stand up in court and tell the truth, even though doing so would put each of them in Preston's crosshairs, even though Preston had already proven he'd destroy anyone who threatened his perfect plan. I had 4 weeks to build a case strong enough to free my daughter, and Preston had 6 months head start. 4 weeks wasn't enough time. But Ralph Manning had spent 40 years making impossible timelines work. I called him before I'd even finished reading the competency petition, and the first thing he said when I told him about the deadline was, "Good, that means we go to war on 2 fronts." Explain. We don't just defend your competency, we attack. File suit against Preston for unlawful imprisonment, financial fraud, medical record, falsification. Request emergency hearing. Make him fight on 2 fronts, defending himself while trying to prove you're incompetent. Can we do that? We can do more than that. Ralph's voice went sharp with strategy. We request the court bring Soleil in for independent psychiatric evaluation. Not Dr. Graves, not Preston's doctors. A court-appointed psychiatrist with no connection to either side. If she's really as incompetent as Preston claims, he should have no problem with that. The strategy was elegant. Preston had built his entire case on the premise that Soleil needed protection from her own impaired judgment. An independent evaluation would either confirm that or prove he'd been lying for 4 years. What do we need? I asked. Evidence. Witnesses. Every piece of proof you've gathered, and most importantly, every person you've found needs to be willing to testify in court, under oath, with Preston watching. Corinne, Hugh, Pilar, Thane. 4 people who'd seen pieces of Preston's perfect crime. 4 people who'd have to stand up in a courtroom and admit what they'd witnessed, what they'd suspected, what they'd failed to do. They'll know the risks, I said. They need to know. Preston will see their faces, learn their names, spend the rest of his life finding ways to punish them for speaking against him. Ralph paused. I can't force anyone to testify. Neither can you. They have to choose. Over the next 3 days, I met each of them separately. Different locations, different conversations, same question. Corinne Kelly first. A quiet cafe in Brooklyn far from Manhattan. She looked thinner than when I'd met her 2 weeks ago, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept since our conversation. He mentioned my daughter, she said before I could even explain why I'd asked to meet. Preston. Just once casual conversation while I was checking Soleil's vitals. Asked about my family, said he hoped my little girl stayed safe. That's all. Just that. I'm not here to pressure you, I said, but there's going to be a trial. And if you testify about what you saw, Soleil's real condition, the fake medical records, your statement could help free her. And Preston will know I spoke. Yes. She looked at her coffee. I have a daughter. She's 7. She needs me. I understand, but I can't look at her and know I stayed silent. I can't teach her to be brave if I'm not. Corinne met my eyes. I'll testify. Hugh Newberry, a park bench in Queens. He looked older than 55. Guilt ages people faster than time. I called the police once, he said. Once. Then Preston showed them papers, and they left. I heard her crying other nights. I never called again. His hands twisted together. I believed the papers. I let myself believe them because it was easier than wondering if I should break down a door. You're getting a chance to finish what you started, I said. At what cost? Preston's? He's connected, wealthy. He could make my life very difficult. He could? How do you ask someone to risk everything for a stranger? You don't. You ask them to risk everything so they can sleep at night, knowing they finally did the right thing. My daughter has been erased for 4 years, I said. She doesn't need a hero. She just needs someone to stand up and tell the truth about what they heard. Hugh nodded slowly. I'll testify. Pilar Sinclair. Her design studio evening after her last client left. She didn't wait for me to ask. When's the trial? She said. 4 weeks. I'll be there. Tell me what you need me to say. Just the truth? The nicknames she stopped using. The texts that weren't her voice. The voicemail from her wedding. Preston's going to know I spoke against him. Yes. Good. Pilar's eyes were fierce. I want him to know. I want him to see my face when I explain how he erased my best friend and thought nobody would notice. Thane Fitzgerald. A Manhattan hotel bar late at night. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. If I testify, I'm admitting I followed you, he said. I'm admitting I participated in surveillance. That makes me complicit. It makes you a witness who switched sides. Ralph can get you immunity in exchange for testimony. And my uncle will never forgive me. Your uncle is preparing to destroy you whether you testify or not. The money laundering case he's building, that doesn't go away if you stay quiet. It goes away if you help us dismantle his entire operation first. Thane stared at his untouched drink. I helped keep her prisoner. I watched you for him. I reported your movements so he'd know what you were doing. And now you're here. That's what matters. I don't know if I can face him in a courtroom. My daughter has been erased for 4 years. She doesn't need a hero. She just needs someone to stand up and tell the truth. Thane finally looked at me, nodded. I'll testify. When Thane finally agreed last, to decide hardest to convince, I saw something shift in all their faces. They weren't victims anymore. They weren't bystanders. They were witnesses. And witnesses have power. 4 people. 4 different reasons for fear. 4 different versions of courage. Corinne protecting her daughter by teaching her to be brave. Hugh trying to fix his one failed phone call with one real testimony. Pilar fierce loyalty to a friend she'd thought was lost. Thane choosing exposure over complicity. I called Ralph that night. I have them, I said. All 4, they'll testify. Then we file tomorrow. Counter petition, lawsuit, request for Soleil's evaluation, everything. And Preston gets served with papers showing we're not defending, we're attacking. He wanted a 4-week war. We're giving him one. 4 witnesses willing to walk into a courtroom and tell the truth about what Preston Cobb had done, knowing he'd see their faces, learn their names, and spend the rest of his life finding ways to punish them for it. We had our army, but Preston had 4 weeks to destroy us before we ever reached that courtroom, and he was about to show me exactly how ruthless he could be when cornered. Preston started showing his teeth the second week. The man following me through Manhattan streets made no effort to hide. He stayed 20 feet back, met my eyes when I turned around, and followed me for 6 blocks, like he wanted me to know exactly who'd sent him. I photographed him, sent the image to Carlton with a message not hiding anymore. Carlton's response came fast. He wants you scared. Don't give him that. I wasn't scared. I was calculating. Preston had switched from invisible surveillance to visible intimidation, which meant the witnesses agreeing to testify had rattled him. He was trying to make me back down before we reached the courtroom. The anonymous text arrived that afternoon. You are ruining your family's life. Stop. No name. Burner phone. But the phrasing was careful, not threatening me directly, framing it as concern for family. Deniable. Legal. Preston's precision showing through even in intimidation. I didn't respond. Sent a screenshot to Ralph Manning instead. Save everything, Ralph texted back. Evidence of witness intimidation if we need it. That night, I returned to my hotel room and knew immediately someone had been inside. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was missing. The room looked exactly as I'd left it, bed made. Laptop closed, curtains drawn. But the air felt different. Someone had been there. Then I saw it. Desmond's cracked phone sitting on the table beside my laptop. The phone that had started everything. The phone I'd locked in Carlton's safe 3 days ago. I picked it up carefully. Same crack pattern, same weight. I turned it over. Different serial number. Not the original phone. A replica. Preston showing me he knew about the evidence, knew where it had been stored, could recreate it perfectly enough to leave as a message. The phone sat on my hotel table where someone's hands had placed it, the same phone Desmond had risked everything to bring me. Preston wanted me to know he could take anything, anytime, reach anywhere, but he'd already made his mistake. The evidence was gone, copied, distributed to 3 separate locations. All he had left was fear. I called Carlton. He broke into my room, I said. Left a replica of the phone. Not a break-in. He probably bribed hotel staff for a key. Deniable. No cameras catch him entering. Carlton's voice was calm. Psychological warfare. He's trying to make you feel unsafe, unprotected. It's working. Good. Let him think that. Let him believe his intimidation is effective. Carlton paused. Meanwhile, change hotels. Send me your new location. And understand something Preston only uses fear when he's run out of better options. I changed hotels that night. Paid cash. Used a different name. Sent the location only to Ralph and Carlton. 3 days before trial, I sat in the new hotel lobby reading case files when someone sat down across from me. Velma Cobb, 68, and Preston's mother looked at me with the haunted expression of someone who'd chosen her son over the truth. Mr. Whitfield, she said, may I speak with you? I'd heard her voice on Thane's recording. Heard her ask Preston what would happen if I found out. Heard her complicity. Mrs. Cobb, you should stop this. Preston is my son. You don't understand what you're doing. I closed the file. Looked at this woman who'd raised the man who'd imprisoned my daughter. Do you know that my daughter is being held against her will? I asked. That Preston has had her locked in that penthouse for 4 years. That he's stolen millions from her company and created fake medical records to justify it. Velma's silence lasted too long. Her hands trembled in her lap. Guilt and fear written across her face. You know, I said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Preston will never let this go to court. I'm begging you, please stop before someone gets hurt. Not a threat. A warning from a mother who knew what her son had done and was terrified of what he might do next. Your son imprisoned my daughter for 4 years, I said. Stole her money, erased her from the world, and you knew. I didn't know at first. By the time I understood, she stopped. He's my son. What was I supposed to do? Tell someone, call the police, help her. You don't understand Preston. Once he decides something, he doesn't stop. He plans everything, controls everything. Her eyes were wet. If this goes to trial, if he loses, I don't know what he'll do. I looked at this woman begging me to stop, to let her son continue imprisoning my daughter. to walk away and leave Soleil in that white room forever. And I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Mrs. Cobb, your son built a cage for my daughter. But looking at you, I think he built one for you, too, and his nephew, and everyone else who got close to him. I stood. The trial is in 3 days. If you want to help Soleil, if you want to do the right thing, you can testify about what you know. I can't betray my son. Then you're choosing his crimes over someone's freedom. I walked away, left Velma Cobb sitting in that lobby, hands shaking, trapped by maternal love and fear of what her son might do. I watched her walk away later, shoulders hunched, and understood something I hadn't expected. Preston hadn't just imprisoned my daughter. He'd built cages for everyone he touched: his mother, his nephew, even himself. A man so controlled, so meticulous, so terrified of losing power that he'd locked himself into a life where the only way forward was to keep lying, keep threatening, keep tightening the grip. Preston had been so careful, so meticulous, trapping Soleil with fake records and offshore accounts and bought doctors. But he'd made one miscalculation. He'd shown everyone around him exactly who he was. And now they were all terrified, not of losing to me in court, but of what he'd do if he felt cornered. 3 days. That's all that stood between us, and a courtroom where Preston would have to watch his perfect lie unravel in public. And cornered predators are the most dangerous kind. 3 days turned into trial day, with the inevitability of a clock winding down to its final tick. The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and old arguments. I sat at the plaintiff's table while fluorescent lights hummed overhead, watching Preston adjust his tie across the aisle, still playing the concerned husband even here. Judge Brennan looked like she'd been carved from granite. 60-something, steel gray hair pulled back, tight eyes that had seen every courtroom trick twice. She reviewed the docket, then looked up. Petition for competency, evaluation Cobb versus Whitfield. Counsel proceed. Preston's lawyer stood. Younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of expensive suit and practiced sympathy that comes from defending guilty clients. Your Honor, we're here today because my client has genuine concerns about his father-in-law's mental capacity and judgment. Mr. Whitfield has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past months, making unfounded accusations, harassment, paranoid delusions about his own family. He pulled up a photograph on the courtroom monitor. Me standing across the street from Preston's building, camera in hand, photographing the entrance. This image shows Mr. Whitfield stalking my client's residence, taking photographs, conducting surveillance, behavior consistent with obsessive fixation rather than rational concern. I stared at that photograph, remembered that day 3 weeks ago, remembered feeling watched. The photo was taken by a private security consultant. Preston's lawyer continued. My client became concerned for his safety and his wife's safety after Mr. Whitfield began making wild accusations about unlawful imprisonment and financial fraud. These accusations have no basis. In reality, they're the product of an elderly man struggling with grief, confusion, and declining cognitive function. Ralph stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying rather than presenting evidence. Sustained, Judge Brennan said. Mr. Foster, stick to facts. Preston's lawyer, Foster, nodded. The facts, Your Honor, are that Mr. Whitfield has convinced himself of an elaborate conspiracy. He's enlisted others in his delusion. He's harassed his son-in-law, threatened legal action, and demonstrated increasingly poor judgment. We request the court order a full psychiatric evaluation to determine if Mr. Whitfield is competent to manage his own affairs. Foster sat down. Preston's hands rested calmly on the table. Perfect composure. Judge Brennan looked at Ralph. Mr. Manning, your response. Ralph stood slowly, placed a USB drive on the table. Your Honor, opposing counsel claims my client is delusional. I'd like to present evidence that every accusation Mr. Whitfield has made is not only true, but meticulously documented. He connected the USB to the courtroom system. Soleil's video appeared on the monitor. My daughter in that white room, eyes red, voice steady. Dad, her recorded voice said, for the past 4 years, the person who texted you has never been me. The courtroom went silent. I watched Preston's hands grip the table edge, knuckles turning white. The first physical sign that the perfect mask was cracking. Ralph let the video play, Soleil explaining the captivity, the fake messages, Preston's control. When it ended, Ralph pulled up another document. This video was recorded on a phone smuggled to Mrs. Cobb by a delivery worker. Mr. Whitfield received it in January. He didn't respond with paranoia or confusion. He responded with investigation. Ralph displayed the photo Foster had used me photographing the building. This surveillance photograph, it was taken by Preston Cobb's own nephew, Thane Fitzgerald, who Mr. Cobb employed to follow and monitor Mr. Whitfield. The nephew is prepared to testify that he was instructed to document Mr. Whitfield's movements as part of Mr. Cobb's counter-surveillance operation. Preston's face stayed neutral, but his hands hadn't loosened their grip. Ralph continued, Mr. Whitfield conducted a methodical investigation. He hired a private investigator, former NYPD detective Carlton Bentley. He consulted legal counsel myself. He gathered witnesses. Ralph pulled up bank records. Wire transfers totaling $2.1 million from Mrs. Cobb's business accounts to Icelandic shell companies controlled by Preston Cobb, transferred over 18 months under medical power of attorney that Mr. Cobb obtained through falsified psychiatric records. More documents appeared. Psychiatric evaluation dated 3 months before Mr. Cobb told anyone his wife was ill. Medical records created by Dr. Philip Graves, who received $180,000 from Mr. Cobb's shell company over 3 years. Ralph played the audio next. Preston's voice filled the courtroom. Lonely old men are the easiest to fool, Mother. He won't know anything until it's too late. I watched Preston's face on the courtroom monitor, the recorded version explaining his plan to his mother. Then I looked across the aisle at the real Preston sitting perfectly still, watching his own voice condemn him. 2 versions of the same man, one recorded lie, one living mask trying not to crack. Your Honor, Ralph said, Mr. Whitfield is not delusional. He's not incompetent. He's a 69-year-old man who discovered his daughter had been imprisoned for 4 years and responded with exactly the kind of methodical patient investigation you'd expect from someone who spent his life fixing broken things. Judge Brennan looked at the evidence on her monitor, then at Preston, then at me. Mr. Foster, does your client have a response to these allegations? Foster stood, opened his mouth, closed it. Preston whispered something to him. Your Honor, we maintain that these accusations are... I've seen the evidence, counsel. Judge Brennan cut him off. I've heard the recording. I've reviewed the financial documents. This court is not prepared to rule on Mr. Whitfield's competency at this time. She turned to Preston. However, Mr. Cobb, if your wife is truly under medical care as you claim, this court requests her presence for an independent psychiatric evaluation. Preston's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, Mrs. Cobb is in a fragile state. Court appearances could be detrimental. Then we'll conduct the evaluation in chambers with only necessary personnel present. Judge Brennan's voice was steel. But she will be brought before this court, Thursday morning, 9 a.m. If she's truly incompetent, an independent evaluation will confirm that. If she's not, she looked directly at Preston, then we have a very different situation. The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. Mr. Cobb, your wife will be brought before this court Thursday morning at 9 a.m. for independent evaluation. This hearing is adjourned. Across the aisle, I watched Preston's face do something I'd never seen before. The mask slipped, just for a second, and underneath was pure fear. Preston's fear lasted about 10 seconds. Then the mask settled back into place. Perfect composure, perfect concern, but I'd seen what was underneath now. And tomorrow, when Soleil walked into this courtroom, everyone else would see it too. Day 2 began with witnesses. Ralph called the first witness, and I watched a woman I'd never met walk to the stand to fight for my daughter. Corinne Kelly looked exactly like what she was, a nurse who'd seen too much and couldn't stay quiet anymore. 40 years old with steady hands and steadier eyes. She took the oath, sat down, and looked directly at Preston without flinching. Ralph started gently. Ms. Kelly, can you describe your professional relationship with Mrs. Cobb? I provided home nursing care for 8 months. Preston Cobb hired me through a medical agency to check on his wife's health monitor. Her medications provide basic care. And what was your assessment of Mrs. Cobb's mental state? She wasn't mentally ill. She was aware, intelligent, articulate. The medications made her drowsy, but when she was alert, she was completely coherent. Foster stood. Ms. Kelly, you're not a psychiatrist. You're not qualified to diagnose psychiatric conditions. I'm a nurse, not a psychiatrist, Corinne agreed, but I know the difference between mental illness and captivity. Ralph pulled up medical records. Ms. Kelly, how often did you see Mrs. Cobb during those 8 months? Twice? Only twice in 8 months. Mr. Cobb would call, say his wife needed a checkup. He'd give me about 30 minutes' notice. When I arrived, Mrs. Cobb would be in her room. Medications already administered, medical records already laid out. Corinne's voice was steady. Looking back, I realized he was staging it. The 30 minutes gave him time to medicate her heavily enough that she couldn't say much, arrange the room, prepare everything. Foster stood again. Your Honor, this witness is speculating. She has eyes, Ralph said. That's credential enough to describe what she saw. Judge Brennan nodded. Overruled. The witness may describe her observations. Corinne continued. Mrs. Cobb asked me once when Mr. Cobb stepped out of the room to find a way to tell her father. She said, please find a way to tell my father. That's not mental illness. That's desperation. I watched Foster cross-examine her, watched him try to shake her testimony, suggest she'd misunderstood, misremembered. But Corinne had spent 8 months carrying guilt, and now she was purging it with truth. Foster couldn't break simple facts stated by someone who finally believed she was doing the right thing. Ralph called Hugh Newberry next. He was 55, gray-haired, wearing a cardigan that had seen better decades. He spoke with the flat exhaustion of someone who'd been right for 2 years, while everyone called him wrong. I live in the penthouse next to Mr. Cobb's, Hugh said. We share a wall. About 2 years ago, I started hearing sounds. Knocking, crying, someone calling for help. What did you do? Ralph asked. I called the police. First time, second time, third time. 12 times total over 8 months. And every time Mr. Cobb would answer the door, show the officers psychiatric commitment papers, medical authorization, explain his wife had episodes, that she was under medical care, that everything was being handled properly. The officers would apologize for disturbing him and leave. Foster tried attacking Hugh's reliability. You reported this how many times, Mr. Newberry? 12 times, perhaps obsessively. Hugh looked at him. 12 times. Because 12 times nobody listened. I heard someone screaming, help me, 3 times. That's not ambiguous. That's not mental illness. That's someone trapped. I watched Foster attack each witness and realized something chilling. The lawyer actually believed his client. Preston's lies were that polished, that complete, that he'd convinced his own attorney that this was all a misunderstanding. Foster wasn't defending someone he knew was guilty. He was defending someone he genuinely thought was being wrongly accused, which made Preston's deception even more complete. Ralph called Pilar Sinclair. Pilar walked to the stand like she was walking toward a fight. She'd been waiting 4 years to have 38 designer suit eyes red from crying, but voice steady as steel. Ms. Sinclair, what was your relationship with Mrs. Cobb? Best friends since design school, 15 years, closer than sisters. And how did that relationship change after her marriage to Preston Cobb? It stopped. Pilar's voice was cold. Not gradually, suddenly. She married him in December 2020. By February, the person texting me wasn't Soleil anymore. Ralph displayed text messages. Can you elaborate? The texts were grammatically correct, polite, empty. This text says, I'm fine, talk soon. Soleil never said talk soon in her life. She said later, Gator, every time, for 15 years. Not once in 4 years of text did she use our nickname. Foster stood. People's communication styles change, Ms. Sinclair. Marriage, careers, life. Not their entire personality. Pilar cut him off. Not their voice, not their soul. I knew something was wrong. I tried visiting. The doorman said she wasn't seeing guests. I tried calling. She never answered. I knew. Ralph held up a phone. Ms. Sinclair, you brought something to share with the court. A voicemail from Soleil's wedding day, 4 years ago, before. The courtroom speakers crackled when Ralph connected Pilar's phone. Then Soleil's voice filled the room, bright, laughing, alive. P-Star, I can't believe I'm actually married. Call me later, okay? I want to hear everything about... The message cut off. 11 seconds. But in those 11 seconds, I heard my daughter, the way she'd been before Preston erased her. The contrast with 4 years of flat, emotionless texts was devastating. I looked across the aisle at Preston. His face was doing something I'd never seen. Not fear this time, confusion, like he was hearing something he'd never known existed. Pilar was right. He'd married Soleil for her assets, her company, her reputation. But sitting there listening to who she'd really been, watching him process the warmth and humor and personality he'd never bothered to learn. He'd stolen her life without ever knowing her. The voicemail ended. The courtroom went silent. That, Pilar said quietly, is who Soleil was. Who she still is, under whatever Preston has done to her. And every text I got for 4 years was a lie. Judge Brennan looked at Preston, then at the clock. This court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. Mr. Cobb, I expect your wife present at 9 a.m. as ordered. Preston stood, adjusted his tie, walked out of the courtroom with perfect composure. But I'd seen his face when Soleil's voice filled the room. Tomorrow he'd have to face her in person, and his carefully constructed reality would meet its architect. When the afternoon session started, Ralph stood and said he had two more witnesses, and I watched Preston's lawyer stop writing mid-sentence. Your Honor, the state calls Thane Fitzgerald. The man who'd approached me in Central Park walked to the stand. He wore the same gray suit, but his shoulders looked lighter somehow, like testifying, released something he'd carried too long. Ralph established credentials, 10 years at Preston's investment firm partner, since 2019 resigned 4 months ago. Mr. Fitzgerald, did you have access to the defendant's financial records? Yes, complete access to client accounts and internal transfers. Did you notice anything unusual regarding accounts associated with Soleil Whitfield? Thane looked at Preston, then at me. 3 years ago, Preston created a shell company through an Icelandic bank. Over 36 months, he transferred $2.1 million from Soleil's inheritance accounts into that shell. The transfers happened in small increments, 20,000 here, 30,000 there, designed to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. The judge leaned forward. 2.1 million. Yes, Your Honor. Soleil's mother left her approximately $2.8 million. Preston systematically moved 75% of it offshore, while telling Soleil the accounts were earning modest returns. Ralph pulled up bank statements on the courtroom screen, columns of transfers, dates, amounts. Did Preston know you discovered this? Yes, I confronted him 6 months ago. He offered me $500,000 to stay quiet. When I refused, he fired me and threatened to destroy my reputation if I spoke to anyone. Did he succeed in silencing you? For 4 months, yes. Then Mr. Whitfield's attorney found me, and I realized staying silent made me complicit. Ralph nodded. Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording Mr. Fitzgerald made during that confrontation. The judge approved. Static filled the courtroom. Then Preston's voice, clear, unmistakable, recorded 6 months ago in his office. You think you're protecting her? She's broken Thane. She was always fragile. I just helped her understand reality. And her father, lonely old men, are the easiest to fool. I've been planning this since the wedding. Isolate her, control the narrative, and when the time comes, liquidate everything and start fresh. Somewhere that doesn't ask questions. The recording ended. The courtroom went completely silent. Not the quiet of people listening, but the silence of people processing something they couldn't immediately comprehend. Preston's lawyer stared at his notes. The judge's face showed nothing, but her hand gripped her gavel, like she wanted to use it for something other than procedure. I looked at Preston. He sat perfectly still, but the muscle in his jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Ralph let the silence hold for 5 seconds. No further questions. Preston's lawyer declined cross-examination. Thane stepped down and Ralph called Carlton Bentley, the forensic analyst who'd tracked Preston's digital surveillance. Carlton explained metadata. Cloud storage, deleted files, recovered. Then he showed the elevator footage. This recording is from 8 months ago. The defendant deleted it from local building servers, but the elevator company's cloud backup preserved it. The screen showed the building's elevator interior timestamp in the corner, fisheye lens distortion. The doors opened and Soleil stepped in. She wore a blue dress, bare feet. Her hair looked unwashed. She pressed the lobby button, then leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. The elevator descended. When the doors opened, she stepped into the lobby, walked 4 steps toward the front door. Then Preston appeared from the stairwell, grabbed her arm and pulled her back. The entire escape attempt lasted 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The defendant ran down 8 flights of stairs to intercept her, Carlton said. He was monitoring her movements in real time through cameras he installed throughout the apartment. This footage shows Mrs. Whitfield was not catatonic, not incapable, she was imprisoned. The judge watched the footage loop once more, Soleil walking toward freedom, Preston pulling her back. Mr. Manning, do you have additional witnesses? No, Your Honor, but Mrs. Whitfield herself has requested to address the court. The rear courtroom door opened. Soleil walked in with a victim's advocate beside her. She wore jeans and a gray sweater clothes that looked like they belonged to her, not clothes someone chose for her. Her hair was pulled back. She looked thin, but she walked steadily. She looked at the judge, then at Preston, then at me. The judge spoke gently. Mrs. Whitfield, you're not required to testify. Your father's attorney has presented substantial evidence. Soleil's voice was quiet but clear. I want to speak. Please approach the bench. Soleil walked forward. She didn't sit. She stood before the judge and spoke without looking at notes, without hesitation. 4 years ago, I believed my husband when he said I was sick. I believed him when he said my father didn't want to see me. I believed him because I loved him and thought love meant trust. But 8 months ago, I tried to leave, and he dragged me back. That's when I understood I wasn't sick. I was captive. Every day after that, I waited for someone to find me. I heard my neighbor calling through the walls. I saw a nurse who tried to help. I knew my best friend was asking questions, and I knew my father. Her voice caught. She looked directly at me. I knew my father would never stop looking. She said, "Dad," and looked right at me. And I hadn't heard her voice, her real voice, not through walls or recordings or hidden cameras in 4 years. Judge Brennan, reading glasses, caught the courtroom light as she lifted the verdict document, and the room went silent in a way that made my ribs ache. Soleil had spoken. She'd said "Dad" and looked at me with eyes I'd spent 4 years trying to find. Now everyone waited for what came next, the translation of testimony and evidence into law, the moment when belief either solidified into fact or dissolved into insufficient proof. Judge Brennan cleared her throat. I've reviewed all testimony evidence and exhibits presented over 2 days. The petition filed by Preston Cobb to declare Lowell Whitfield mentally incompetent is denied in its entirety. Mr. Whitfield's competency is not and has never been in question. The evidence shows a man who pursued truth with methodical persistence, not delusion. Ralph didn't move beside me, but I felt him exhale. Regarding Mrs. Soleil Whitfield, the judge continued, the evidence presented establishes beyond reasonable doubt that she was held against her will through psychological manipulation, physical restraint, falsified medical records, and financial control. The testimony of neighbors, medical professionals, and digital forensic analysts paints a clear picture of unlawful imprisonment lasting approximately 4 years. Preston sat perfectly still across the aisle. His lawyer had stopped taking notes. Mr. Cobb, you will face criminal charges for unlawful imprisonment, financial fraud totaling $4.2 million through unauthorized transfers, and offshore concealment conspiracy to produce false medical records and witness intimidation. Dr. Philip Graves will have his medical license immediately revoked, and the state medical board will pursue criminal charges for his role in creating psychiatric evaluations dated 3 months before Mrs. Whitfield allegedly exhibited symptoms. The judge looked directly at Preston. Bryce Lancaster, building manager at 447 East 68th Street, is under investigation for concealment of felony evidence and accepting $15,000 to delete security footage. The district attorney's office will determine additional charges. She paused, and the courtroom held that pause like something physical. Mr. Cobb, based on the criminal evidence uncovered in these proceedings regarding your offshore accounts, the district attorney's office has just issued an emergency criminal warrant for grand larceny and unlawful imprisonment. Because you are deemed a severe flight risk, this court will now execute that warrant. Bailiff, take the defendant into custody. That was the twist I hadn't expected. Not letting Preston walk out free to surrender later, but taking him into custody right there in the courtroom where he'd tried to prove I was incompetent. The architecture of his lies collapsed in the room where he'd built them. The bailiff, acting on the newly signed criminal warrant from the district attorney, moved toward Preston with the calm efficiency of inevitability. Mr. Cobb, step away from the table and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest. Preston stood. He looked around the courtroom as if searching for an exit that didn't exist, some procedural escape he'd missed in his planning. His eyes swept past his lawyer, past Ralph, past the gallery where witnesses sat. Then he looked at Soleil. She stared back without expression. 4 years of captivity lived in that gaze, every locked door, every falsified record, every phone call he'd prevented, every lie he'd told about her mental state, while systematically stealing her inheritance and freedom. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, just watched him with the steady attention of someone who'd been watched too long and was finally returning the favor. The handcuffs clicked. I watched them close around Preston's wrists and thought about all the invisible restraints he'd put on Soleil: locked apartment doors, falsified psychiatric records, controlled medication schedules, monitored phone lines, isolated friendships. Metal restraints looked more honest. They didn't pretend to be care. They didn't masquerade as love or medical necessity. They were exactly what they appeared to be: limits. enforced by someone with power over someone without. Now the power had reversed. The bailiff guided Preston toward the side exit, past everyone he'd tried to fool. Near the back of the gallery, I saw Velma, Cobb Preston's mother, watching her son leave in handcuffs. Her face was unreadable, but she whispered something to herself that might have been, "I don't know my son anymore," or might have been something else entirely. She'd warned me in that hotel lobby. She'd known what he was. The door closed behind Preston. Judge Morales looked at Soleil. "Mrs. Whitfield, you're free to go. The court recommends medical evaluation and counseling services, which Mr. Manning can arrange. I'm sorry for what you endured, and I'm grateful you found your voice." Soleil nodded but didn't speak. She'd used her words where they mattered most. 10 minutes later, we stood in the courthouse hallway. Tall windows let in afternoon sun that made everything look overexposed, too bright, too real after 2 days in the controlled light of courtroom fluorescence. The hallway was nearly empty. Our lawyers were handling paperwork. Reporters waited outside the building. For this moment, it was just us. Soleil turned and hugged me. She was thinner than 4 years ago, frailer, her arms holding on with desperate strength, like she thought I might disappear. But underneath the unfamiliar weight loss and the way her shoulders curved inward, from years of making herself smaller, I could still feel the same person, familiar bones beneath unfamiliar damage. She cried. Not the silent tears of someone who'd learned to cry quietly so no one would hear, but full sobs that shook her whole frame. I held her tighter and realized I couldn't cry. Not because I wasn't emotional. God knows I felt everything, but because I'd already used every possible tear during the 4-year search. Late nights in the antique shop staring at her photo, phone calls with lawyers that went nowhere, dead ends that felt like grave markers. I'd cried all of it out already, leaving only this quiet, steady relief that felt more like bedrock than celebration. "I'm here," I said. "I knew, Dad." Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "I knew you would come. You're safe now. You're safe." I repeated it like a promise, like an incantation, like words that could rebuild 4 years in 4 syllables. Outside the windows, New York City made its usual noise, traffic sirens, construction, millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with ours. But in that courthouse hallway, the only sound was 2 people breathing together in the same space, without walls or locks or lies between us. We stood there with sun coming through windows, older than both of us, and she breathed, and I breathed, and that sound, just 2 people breathing, just daughter and father occupying the same air again, was enough to fill 4 years of silence. The fight was over. Now came healing. Ralph called 3 days after the verdict to tell me Preston had been indicted on 4 federal charges, and I realized justice has its own timeline separate from healing. The courthouse hallway reunion had been quiet and simple, 2 people breathing together after 4 years apart. But the legal system moved with its own mechanical precision, processing what we'd lived through into charges and counts and potential sentences. Preston's facing unlawful imprisonment, financial fraud, falsifying medical records, and obstruction of justice, Ralph said over the phone. His voice carried the satisfaction of a man who'd built a case brick by brick and watched it stand. Federal prosecutors are being aggressive. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at 20 to 30 years. I did the math without meaning to. Preston would spend more years in prison than Soleil had spent in captivity. The equation felt just fair, even, but it didn't erase what had happened. No sentence could give Soleil back the 4 years he'd stolen. Justice could punish the theft, but couldn't return what was taken. "What about the money in Iceland?" I asked. "Frozen. Detective Dwight Lockwood is coordinating with Interpol. It'll take months. International asset recovery always does, but it's coming back. All 2.1 million plus whatever interest accumulated. Dr. Graves, medical license permanently revoked. He's facing criminal prosecution for false psychiatric certification and conspiracy. The state medical board is pushing hard. They don't like doctors who weaponize diagnoses. And Bryce Lancaster, charged with criminal complicity for concealing a felony. He took $15,000 to delete security footage that would have helped Soleil escape months earlier. That doesn't go unpunished." Ralph paused. "Thane Fitzgerald got a plea bargain for his cooperation. Probation, community service, but no prison time. He came forward voluntarily, and his testimony was crucial. I thought about Thane approaching me in Central Park with that USB drive, how he'd carried the weight of knowledge until it became unbearable. Some people broke under Preston's threats. Some people broke free from them. Thank you, Ralph, for everything. You did the hard part. I just knew which forms to file. 2 weeks after the verdict, Soleil was living in a temporary apartment in Manhattan. Small, clean, with windows that opened and locks only she controlled. I stayed in a place nearby, close enough to help, but far enough to give her space. Dr. Ashford was maybe 50, gray-haired and gentle-voiced, the kind of physician who actually listened, and she treated Soleil's medication detox with the seriousness it deserved. She explained that the drugs Dr. Graves had prescribed weren't just unnecessary, they were actively harmful. The medication would have caused slow organ damage, Dr. Ashford told me during one consultation. Another year or two at those doses, and we'd be looking at kidney failure. Preston wasn't just imprisoning her, he was poisoning her. But under proper supervision, Soleil was tapering off safely. She slept better, ate more. Color returned to her face like spring arriving late, but arriving nonetheless. The fog Dr. Graves had manufactured was lifting, revealing the person underneath. She started making phone calls to old friends who thought she'd ghosted them. I'd sit in the next room and hear her voice, tentative at first, then stronger, explaining in careful words what had happened. Some conversations lasted 5 minutes. Some lasted an hour. Each one was a thread reconnecting her to the life Preston had cut her away from. Watching her make those calls, I thought about voices. 4 years of silence, then courtroom testimony, now tentative reconnection, like learning to speak a native language after forced exile. The words were the same, but using them again required relearning muscles that had atrophied. One afternoon, she talked about her interior design company. I want it back, Dad. She sat at the small kitchen table with coffee gone cold. Not the money, I mean. Yes, the money matters, but the work. The part of me he couldn't lock away. I designed spaces in my head during those 4 years. Entire buildings. Color palettes. Furniture arrangements. I kept that part alive even when everything else felt dead. Then we'll get it back, I said, one piece at a time. She asked me to help inventory what Preston had taken. Client lists, design portfolios, business contracts. We spread papers across her apartment floor like archaeologists reconstructing a destroyed civilization. It would take time, but time was something we had now. Some mornings I'd arrive and find Soleil sitting at the window, staring out at Manhattan. She'd watch the city move, cars and people, and the endless motion of millions of lives intersecting and diverging, and not say anything. At first I'd ask if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she wanted to talk. But I learned to stop asking. Learned to just sit beside her with my own coffee and look out at the same view. Recovery wasn't linear. It wasn't fast. Some days she'd laugh at a text message, a real laugh, sudden and bright, and I'd realize I'd forgotten what her laugh sounded like before captivity reshaped everything. Other days she'd move through the apartment like a ghost touching doorframes to remind herself the doors opened. Sometimes I forget I'm allowed to leave, she said one morning after long silence. You're allowed everything now. Not everything. She kept looking out the window. I can't get the time back, but I can get mornings like this. I thought about Opal, then my wife Soleil's mother, gone for 8 years, but still teaching me things I was too stubborn to learn when she was alive. Opal had always understood that fixing wasn't the same as helping. That presence mattered more than solutions. That sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was just sit beside them while they figured out their next step. I'd spent 4 years trying to fix what Preston broke, finding evidence, building legal cases, proving truth. And all of that mattered. But this part, the part that came after the verdict, required different skills. Being there was enough. Silence wasn't emptiness, it was space to breathe. We sat at that window with Manhattan moving below us. And she didn't talk, and I didn't ask. And I finally understood what Mom had been trying to teach me all along. Healing doesn't have a courtroom schedule or a dramatic arc. Sometimes it's just two people sitting in silence while the world keeps spinning, and that's enough. It took me 3 weeks to track down the delivery driver who disappeared into the snow at January night. And when I finally knocked on his door in Queens, Desmond Donovan looked like he'd been expecting me. The quiet mornings with Soleil had taught me patience, but gratitude needed action. The man who'd handed me that cracked phone in the antique shop parking lot, the man who'd started everything, deserved more than wondering what happened next. Desmond's home was modest, 2-story, brick small front yard, the kind of place where delivery drivers actually lived, instead of the Manhattan penthouses they delivered to. He opened the door before I finished knocking. Mr. Whitfield, he said it like a statement, not a question. I wanted to thank you. He stepped aside. Come in. His living room was clean and spare couch. Television bookshelf with actual books. He offered coffee. I accepted. We sat across from each other like two men who'd fought the same war from different positions and were finally comparing notes. Your daughter, he asked. Free, safe, healing. He nodded slowly, relief crossing his face like weather. Good, that's good. I need to know why you did it. Why you remembered her after all that time. Desmond set his coffee down. Your wife gave me an envelope 7 years ago, said I looked like someone who'd do the right thing if it mattered. I stared at him. Opal. I used to deliver to your antique shop, nothing special, just regular supply runs. One day she was there and we got talking. She asked about my route, about the buildings I delivered to. A couple weeks later, she slipped me this envelope. Said, Obey. If anything ever happens to my daughter, Soleil, find a way to contact me. Gave me an email address, emergency number. Told me to keep it sealed unless I needed it. She knew something might happen to Soleil. Desmond's expression turned thoughtful. She said mothers feel danger before it arrives. Said she was covering angles you couldn't see. I thought maybe she was being paranoid rich lady, worrying about rich lady problems. But I kept the envelope. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were listening. 3 years after your wife died, Desmond continued, I delivered to Preston's building. Went up to the penthouse, some expensive furniture shipment. While I was there, I saw your daughter through the interior window. She was just standing there, staring at nothing. Something about the way she looked trapped empty reminded me of your wife's words. It haunted me. Why'd you wait 3 years after you saw her? Took me that long to be sure it wasn't imagination. I saw her a few more times over those years, always the same look, always wrong somehow. Then one day I couldn't not send it. Opened the envelope, sent the email your wife left me, and hoped you'd know what to do with it. I realized I was gripping my coffee cup hard enough to hurt. She built this. Opal built the safety net I never saw. She built several, I think. Desmond stood and retrieved something from a drawer, an old envelope edges worn. Opal's handwriting across the front in blue ink. The date was 3 years before she died. Inside was a folded paper with an email address, a phone number, and one line in her careful script, watch over my family. Holding that envelope 7 years old, my wife's handwriting still clear. I realized she'd known she was dying and spent her last years building invisible scaffolding around our daughter. Insurance I never knew existed until it saved us. Opal couldn't stop her own cancer, but she could identify people like Desmond, decent observant positioned to notice what I couldn't, and give them the tools to act when the time came. She wasn't just living, she was playing chess 3 moves ahead, and I'd been too focused on the day-to-day to see the strategy. Thank you, I said, and my voice sounded strange. Thank you for remembering her. Thank you for not letting my daughter disappear. Your wife saw something in me I didn't know was there. Least I could do was prove her right. 1 month after the verdict, Soleil asked if I'd drive her to meet Pilar at their old Manhattan cafe, the place they used to go every Thursday before Preston isolated her from everyone who knew her real voice. You don't want to come in, Dad? She asked when I pulled up outside. This one's yours. I'll be right here when you're done. She looked at me for a moment, uncertain, grateful. Maybe both, then walked toward the door. I watched through the cafe's front window. Pilar saw her first. She stood so fast her chair scraped backward. Then they were hugging, and it lasted too long the way reunion hugs do when one person thought they'd lost the other permanently. I could see them both crying, then pulling back and laughing at themselves for crying, then crying and laughing at the same time. Then Soleil smiled, not the tired performance smile from the penthouse photographs, not even the cautious apartment smile she'd been practicing in recovery. This was the smile from before, unguarded and real, the expression of someone who remembered what it felt like to be themselves. I watched them talk, couldn't hear the words, didn't need to. Watched Pilar lean forward like every word mattered. Watched Soleil's hands move as she spoke, relearning the gesture language of friendship. I thought about windows then. For months, I'd stared at her prison window from outside, trying to find a way in. Now I was choosing to stay outside a different window, not because I was locked out, but because she was free and didn't need rescue anymore. There's a difference between protection and control, and I was finally learning which was which. 4 years I'd searched for a way in. Now the gift I could give her was staying out, trusting she could rebuild without me hovering over every moment. Through the glass, I heard her laugh, muffled but unmistakable, the sound of someone remembering how to be themselves. I turned away from the cafe window while my daughter was still laughing. That sound, even through glass, even at a distance, even without seeing her face, that was enough. When Soleil said she wanted to come to Wyoming for a while, I didn't ask why, I just started packing. That laughter through the cafe window had been a milestone, but healing didn't follow a straight line. 6 weeks after the verdict, she told me she needed something Manhattan couldn't give her sky, without buildings cutting it into pieces, quiet, that wasn't interrupted by siren space, to remember who she'd been before Preston rewrote her story. I need Wyoming, she said. Not forever, I'll come back to the city, rebuild my business here, but right now I need to see horizon. I understood. She wasn't running from New York. She was running towards something older, the version of herself that existed before captivity, the girl who'd visited my shop on summers and learned to identify oak from maple by touch. She needed to remember that person before she could decide who to become next. We packed light, left the temporary apartment with its controlled locks and victim services contacts, and weekly therapy appointments scheduled on the refrigerator. All of that would be here when she returned. Wyoming was an intermission, not an ending. LaGuardia's departure lounge was chaos. Families, business, travelers, college kids, everyone moving with the casual freedom of people who never questioned their right to go wherever they wanted. Soleil watched them like an anthropologist, still adjusting to a world where doors didn't lock from the outside. The flight west felt like traveling backward through time. 3 months ago, I'd flown east with nothing but Desmond's email and desperate hope. Now I was returning with my daughter beside me, reading a magazine like it was the most normal thing in the world. Which it was, which it should have always been. Laramie's airport was small, 2 gates mountains visible through windows, the kind of place where pilots still waved at ground crew by name. When we stepped outside, Soleil stopped so suddenly I nearly walked into her. The Wyoming sky stretched in every direction. 360 degrees of open air. No skyscrapers. No buildings taller than 3 stories, nothing between earth and atmosphere but space. April afternoon light made the distant mountains look purple-blue, and clouds moved fast across endless blue that didn't stop or turn a corner or get interrupted by architecture. Soleil stood there breathing deep, and her eyes went wet. "It's so vast," she whispered. "Yes, always." I forgot the world was this big. 4 years in a white room with one window looking at another building's brick wall. Medication keeping her foggy, every view controlled and limited and curated to make her feel small. Now this a sky that went on forever, space that didn't end, air that smelled like sage and snow and distance. I watched her discover space again, watched her turn in a slow circle like a child learning directions. North, south, east, west, all of it open, all of it available. She'd spent years trapped in a penthouse prison that ironically sat at the top of a building meant to offer views. But Preston's cage had no views, only walls. Wyoming had nothing but views. Watching her stand under that sky with her arms slightly raised, like testing the space around her, I thought about birds released from cages. They don't immediately fly. They sit on the cage door, first remembering how wings work, relearning the muscle memory of freedom before committing to air. Snow started falling light. April flurries that wouldn't stick, just visiting before spring took over completely. Soleil lifted her face to it and smiled. The drive from the airport to my shop took 2 hours through country that looked exactly like it had for decades. Ranches, open fields, fence lines marking property that stretched farther than Manhattan Island was wide. Soleil watched it all through the car window, following individual snowflakes with her finger against the glass. "You still have the music box I tried to fix when I was 12, she said suddenly. "Never could bring myself to finish it. Wanted you to do it yourself someday. Maybe I will." Whitfield's Antiques and Repair looked exactly like I'd left it, old, brick building, worn wooden sign, warm yellow lights glowing through front windows as evening approached. I'd closed the shop 3 months ago when I flew to New York, left a sign on the door saying, "Family emergency, back soon." Now, soon had arrived. We walked in together. The smell hit first, machine oil, old wood, metal, polished leather, the accumulated scent of decades spent fixing things other people had broken or neglected or loved too much to throw away. Clocks lined one wall, furniture waiting for repair, filled the back room, tools hung on pegboards organized by size and function. Home. Soleil walked through, slowly touching things a chair she'd helped refinish when she was 16, a lamp she'd rewired as a college project, the music box with its broken spring mechanism she'd tried and failed to repair at 12. All the objects we'd worked on together, back when father-daughter time meant passing wrenches and learning patience. She gravitated toward the clocks, 8 of them on the wall, all stopped at different times, waiting for attention. All that stopped time in one room, frozen at the moments their owners had given up winding them. Like a mirror of 4 stolen years waiting to be understood, each clock holding its own story of abandonment and potential repair. I miss this, she said quietly, the smell of old things still being useful. I stood there watching her move through my shop, her shop too, in a way, built from all the hours we'd spent here together, before Preston stole her and realized for the first time in 4 years I didn't have a mission. No clues to chase, no evidence to gather, no lawyers to call, no flights to book, no surveillance to track, no rescue to plan, no broken thing demanding immediate repair, no crisis requiring solution, just this standing in my shop while snow fell outside, and my daughter examined an old music box, and evening turned the windows dark. The absence of urgency felt like the truest kind of peace. Snow fell on the shop windows, the kind of April snow that doesn't stay, just visits. My daughter stood at the workbench, examining an old music box she'd tried fixing as a child, and I stood there not fixing anything, not searching for anything, not planning the next move. For the first time in 4 years, there was nothing that needed repair except time itself, and time I'd learned fixes itself if you let it breathe. I found Soleil in the shop at dawn, standing at my workbench with the pocket watch in her hand, the one I'd been fixing the night everything started. The snow had melted overnight, leaving Wyoming morning light clean and sharp through the windows. She must have woken early, come downstairs while I was still making coffee, and gone straight to the workbench like she used to as a child, drawn to whatever I'd left unfinished. She turned when she heard me. "Are you done fixing it, Dad?" I looked at the watch in her palm. Antique silver case, intricate mechanism visible through the open back. The project I'd abandoned the night Desmond knocked on my door, with a cracked phone, and everything changed. "Not yet, been busy." She set it down on the workbench deliberately, the small metallic sound precise in the quiet shop. "Fix it. I want to hear it tick." Something in the way she said it made me understand she wasn't just requesting a repair. She was telling me the crisis was over. Time to stop being the desperate father tracking evidence across state lines and courtroom testimony. Time to return to being what I was before Preston stole 4 years, a patient craftsman who fixed broken things one detail at a time. We sat together at the workbench the way we had when she was young. Me, working on tiny mechanisms with tools that required steady hands. Her watching without speaking, learning through observation. The ritual of repair. I opened the watch case fully and examined what I'd been doing months ago. The main spring needed replacement. I'd known that then, but hadn't had the right part. Now I pulled the correct spring from my supply drawer and worked methodically. Remove old spring, clean the housing, install new spring with careful tension. Check the gear train alignment. Test each wheel's movement. Soleil watched my hands, the way she used to, her breathing slow and even. Outside Wyoming morning sounds filtered through windbirds, distant traffic on the highway. Inside, only the small metallic clicks of watchmaking and 2 people comfortable in silence. I worked for an hour. She stayed the whole time sitting on the stool she'd claimed at age 10 and never relinquished. When I looked up, she was crying quietly. "You okay?" "I forgot this feeling," she said. "Watching you work, being still without being trapped. It's not the same thing, is it? Being still because you want to versus being still because you can't leave." "No, not the same at all." She wiped her eyes and smiled. "Finish it. I'll wait." That evening my phone buzzed. A text message from a number I recognized immediately. Soleil's real number, her actual phone that Ralph's team had recovered from Preston's locked drawer and reactivated after months of police evidence processing. First message in 4 years that she'd actually written. I looked at the screen. "I'm home, Dad." 3 words. No Oxford commas signaling distress. No calendar photo attachment. No script written by Preston pretending to be his wife. Just daughter texting father from the room upstairs, in the building they both temporarily occupied. The most ordinary message, the most extraordinary proof. Looking at that text, I realized some messages take 4 years to arrive, And when they do, they're worth every second of waiting. I didn't reply with words. Climbed the stairs to her room and knocked softly. She opened the door, phone still in her hand, and I hugged her goodnight, the way I used to when she was small and visiting for summer weeks before her life became Manhattan and interior design and eventually Preston. Good night, I said. Good night, Dad. Ordinary words, extraordinary gift. Late that night, I returned to the workbench. The shop was dark, except for my work lamp, casting focused light on the pocket watch waiting for final assembly. I'd fixed everything I could identify. Spring replaced gears, aligned case hinge, repaired crystal, polished. Now came the test. Close the case when the mechanism, see if time would move again through metal and precision after months of stillness. I closed the back, carefully feeling the satisfying click of proper fit. Turned the watch over. Used the crown to wind the mainspring's slow, steady rotations, feeling the tension build correctly. When it was wound, I set the time to match the wall clock and placed the watch on the workbench. Small, steady ticking began, filled the quiet shop like a heartbeat, proof that something broken doesn't stay broken if someone refuses to give up on it. True for watches, true for daughters, true for families. I listened to that sound and thought about what I'd learned. For 69 years, I'd been a craftsman. Fixed antiques, repaired broken mechanisms, restored things other people discarded. The work required specific skills. Examine every detail, identify hidden faults, understand how pieces connect, work patiently without forcing trust that precision matters more than speed. When Preston took Soleil, I'd thought I needed to become someone else, investigator, strategist, courtroom, warrior. But really, I'd just applied the same skills I'd always had. Examined the evidence, like examining watch gears. Found the hidden faults in Preston's story, like finding a broken spring. Worked patiently, one witness, one recording, one piece of testimony, the way I'd work through a complex repair. I didn't need power or money or connections, just patience, precision, and knowing what to look for. The same approach that fixed century-old pocket watches fixed everything else. The watch ticked in the quiet shop, each sound marking time that wasn't stolen anymore, just passing the way it should. I'd spent 4 years searching for what was broken and finding ways to fix it. One clue, one witness, one piece of evidence at a time. Turns out I'd been training for that my whole life. Patience isn't the absence of action. It's knowing which screw to turn, which detail matters, and having the courage to keep working when everyone else says broken means gone forever. The watch ticked. My daughter was home. Some things you don't give up on. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The skills you already have might be exactly what you need when crisis comes. For 2 years, I ignored the signs. I accepted Preston's excuses because confronting them meant admitting my daughter might be in danger. Don't make my mistake. When your instincts whisper that something's wrong, even when everyone else says you're paranoid, even when the person you suspect seems perfect, listen. Trust takes seconds to break and years to rebuild, but silence can cost everything. I learned that father revenge isn't about anger, it's about precision. When someone harms your family, revenge through the legal system beats revenge through emotion. These family stories revenge teach that patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. The same care I gave to fixing watches saved my daughter. I believe God gave me those skills for a reason to notice what others miss, to persist when others quit. Whether you're seeking father revenge or fighting for truth, remember, the quietest person in the room might be the most dangerous. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my position? Do you think father revenge is justified when the law moves slowly? Leave a comment with your thoughts. I read everyone. If family stories revenge like this moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more family stories, revenge, subscribe to Father's Vengeance. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. Before you go, please remember that while this story is based on real emotions and real struggles, some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. What matters is the lesson we can all carry forward.